All right, back with the starters. Let's have some fun here. We all know the major NBA awards have all been announced, except for really the granddaddy of them all, the All-NBA teams. So we thought we would beat them to the punch and select and debate our picks for our three first, second, and third All-NBA teams. We'll take you through them. This can sometimes get a little convoluted here with all the different picks, but our All-NBA first team, we all agree.
Unanimous.
And by the way, we are adhering to the format used on the official ballot. You got to have 2 guards, 2 forwards, and then 1 center on each team. This isn't like the All-Star game. So our first team, we all have Chris Paul, Steph Curry as our 2 guards, then our 2 forwards, surprise, surprise, Kevin Durant and LeBron James.
So did we pick Durant over LeBron James?
And all of us with our center position going, no, I just like LeBron at the power forward spot more than Durant. And for our center position going Joakim Noah. What was maybe the most difficult selection with your All-NBA first team? Is it the Noah pick there, or is it just Curry as your second guard?
Actually, Noah was quite easy for me. I thought he was clearly the best centre all round this season. Chris Paul, though, was the one for me, only because he played 62 games.
Okay.
The Clippers, no doubt, one of the best teams during the regular season, and he was a fantastic player. He definitely stepped up his game this year, took more of a leadership role, even though he's always been a leader. But I just didn't want to... I didn't want to put him in there just because of reputation. I thought you had to earn it, and he missed basically a quarter of the season through injury. So that, for me, was the toughest, but I still decided to go with him in the end.
Same with you guys with Chris Paul. Did you debate that problem where he had sat out a lot of games?
25% of the season, you got to factor that in with 20 games. But he just did an incredible job, and you look at your other options. You know, with Dragic, who's on my second team, all of our second team, we'll get to that. My toughest choice was Joakim Noah over Dwight Howard for me.
Okay.
I think Dwight Howard should get a little bit more credit than he gets.
Yeah, I agree.
He was spectacular. And Joe, he does so much. I definitely wanted to not give it to him because of the offensive end, but he does so much, even if he doesn't put up the points. Look at those assist numbers. They're ridiculous. He's obviously one of, or if not the best passing man in the game. He had a little bit of a better season than Dwight Howard, but it's so close.
It's weird with Noah. He doesn't have the maybe the scoring responsibilities of a Dwight or even a Duncan or other big guys, but in a weird way, he's way more important to his team's offense because they're sort of that bad.
Absolutely.
And we saw him as that point center.
It would have been different with
He was the focal
Derek.
point of their team on offense and on defense, where with Dwight, he was the focal point of their team on defense, and he was a secondary player on offense.
Okay, well, let's get to the second team. Again, and you guys should chime in. Hashtag the starters. Let's hear your teams, see your teams. Let us know. The second team, we agree on a lot of the picks. We'll go through the ones we agree on. Dragic, all of us. Suns point guard Dragic on our second team. Blake Griffin, that's no surprise. I mean, it was Durant and LeBron. He's probably your third best forward. And then Dwight Howard as our second team center. 3 of us agreeing. Tass, Lee, Trey, you guys all liked Kevin Love. I went with LaMarcus Aldridge as that second forward. And then at that second guard, 3 of us going Harden. And Lee, you going Tony Parker.
Yeah.
Tony Parker.
It shouldn't be about numbers because Tony Parker's numbers are not going to blow you away. The way they play the system in San Antonio, he gets rested a lot during the game, and Popovich also rested him a lot towards the end of the season. He only played 68 games, but in my opinion, Chris Paul is the best point guard in the game, but Tony Parker is the 1A to Chris Paul's 1. I think he's as good. I think he plays on his team's always up the top. Again, San Antonio had the best record in the league, and I just don't think we should always break it down by numbers and things like that. Who is the best point guard in the game and who's the second best point guard in the game? And that, for me, is Tony Parker.
This isn't a team award, though. I think that's the biggest thing. And individual awards just aren't designed for the Spurs anymore. I mean, because of the Spurs and the way they play. They don't play guys a lot of minutes, and that has to come into it.
But he's their best player. He's San Antonio's best player.
Sure, but I just think individual awards aren't designed for any of the San Antonio.
Did you put him on here, though, just because he's a Spur?
Yeah,
No, I didn't. Not at all. Not at all. I mean, Tony Parker, I believe, has been overlooked for this position several times throughout his career, as a lot of Spurs have, because, again, that's how they play the game. But I just believe when he's on the floor, he is as good as Chris Paul.
Were you knocking James Harden down a little bit because of the defense?
Yes,
too?
I was.
Which, I mean, everyone brings up.
Yeah,
I mean,
I absolutely
despite
was.
being, 25-point-per-game scorer, an effective shooter,
Yeah.
what he does for that offense.
All
you're
those
just looking
things
defensively.
are good points that you bring up. But yes, I did take some marks off James Harden.
Tony Parker's not a defensive whiz.
But he's not as bad as James Harden, and he tries.
He's not
hard.
as good on offense.
Yeah, well, that's debatable. James Harden scores more, but Tony Parker, I believe, is as good offensively as James Harden.
It's just funny with these individual awards because Tony Parker doesn't have to do as much for his team as James Harden.
But
Even
in what
Damian
sense?
Lillard.
In what sense he doesn't have to do as much for his team? He runs that team. He's the motor.
Because he
of that
plays
team.
29 minutes a game.
But-
He doesn't
but-
have
but-
to be on the floor. He doesn't have to get to the free throw line. It's a team. It's a beautiful team.
Yeah.
But it's not an individual sort of effort from him
Yeah, but
that is required. That's why these individual awards, they're just not Spurs awards anymore.
Yeah, this guy's still playing 30 minutes per game, running one of the best offenses in the league to the best record in the league.
Yeah, he missed,
but then you see Patty Mills
credit.
comes in, and there's no drop-off at all because it's the same sort of player being plugged into the same role, and the same things are happening. It's not to say that Tony Parker and Patty Mills are the same player, but you can succeed in that system if you do what you're supposed to do.
And so did you guys go, sorry to go off of the Parker Hardaway, we could debate that all day, but why did you go Kevin Love over my pick, LaMarcus Aldridge? Just numbers, pure numbers. Look at this. Like, these are unreal.
Well, numbers are spectacular. Obviously, they're better with Kevin Love. And LaMarcus Aldridge, he's part of a pretty poor defense as well. A worse defense than Kevin Love. So, when you look at the numbers,
he's not a worse defender than Kevin Love.
Listen, Kevin Love has to do more. Kevin Love has to do more. LaMarcus Aldridge.
Well, he's not doing anything on that end of the floor.
Well, either is LaMarcus. I mean, yes, we can say that LaMarcus is a better defender. We can just sit here and say that. But Kevin Love's numbers are better. His defense, his team's defense is actually better. So how can you give it to LaMarcus?
But you're saying it's not a team award. You're saying it's an individual
I know,
award.
but you can't measure defense individually. You can't. I mean, we still can't. There's no way.
How can we?
This is a toss-up for me, LMA and Love. You're picking basically the same player, a guy who can hit from the outside and rebounds a ton. Choose which one you like better. I went with Kevin Love just because his numbers are a tiny bit better.
And I went with LaMarcus because I think, yes, I hear what you're saying that this is an individual award, but your team's success is going to come into play. And the Blazers, and this is where this fourth, let's say, forward position, and there's a lot of guys you could pick. We'll get to some on our third team.
You can't fault Kevin Love for having a stinky cast around him. Sorry, you can't. I mean, LaMarcus last year didn't make the playoffs, but he's still a fantastic player. Kevin Love is an out-of-this-world player. So next year, when he has a cast around him, if he does get traded, is he a better player? No, he's still an excellent player.
Well, I have Kevin Love on my third team. I'm imagining some of you guys have LaMarcus Aldridge on your third team. Let's show it to you, our All-NBA third-team picks. Now, it gets a little hectic at this point. The guards. We got a couple Lowrys. We've got three Lowrys. Trey, the only one going with John Wall. Then you see there, Trey, myself, we like Tony Parker on the third team. Lee, that's where you put Harden. Tass, you go with Damian Lillard. A bit of a shocker there. At the forward spots, Paul George coming up twice. That's where Lee's got LaMarcus. I've got Kevin Love, as I said. Tass, you got LaMarcus. Then Dirk gets thrown in there. And then the centers, Hibbert, Al Jefferson, and Anthony Davis is the one I'm going with at the end. So, where do you want to start with this? Trey, I guess why John Wall over Kyle Lowry? Because that one was a bit of a surprise to me.
Well, they're kind of similar guys in the way that they carry their team and the way that they perform, really. They put up similar numbers. They both have a pretty good two-guard next to them. I think Wall was just a little bit more of a go-to guy for the Wizards this year because Bradley Beal is behind DeMar DeRozan in regards to talent. He's only been in for 2 years. DeMar's in his fourth. DeMar made an all-star team. It's a little bit easier for Kyle Lowry to take a step back, to take some possessions off, to let DeMar go to work, whereas John Wall is at least getting a ton of shots for Brad Beal, and they're both solid defenders. I think John Wall is just a little bit more explosive.
What was the most difficult part of this sort of third-team selection for you? When did it come down to you were like, ooh, I got to get that guy in there? Was it Paul George or Roy Hibbert? That's a little bit surprising, too. You guys obviously trying to focus a little bit on the first 3 months of the season or whatever it was before the Pacers fell off.
Yeah, Paul George, but look at Paul George's numbers, first off, and what he does on both ends. He's had a spectacular season when you look at it overall. Obviously, he's slowed down, but again, numbers compared to Dirk Nowitzki, for instance, who I left off my team, are basically just as good. And obviously, you want to talk about defense. We showed you on this show week after week after week, Dirk Nowitzki playing Olay defense. As much as Dirk is a fantastic player, Paul George does so much more on that end of the floor. I think he had a more complete year.
He doesn't shoot the ball as well as Dirk, though.
Not efficiently.
Dirk basically shot 50, 40, 90 this year, scoring 22 points.
The Mavericks, in his 16th season.
The Mavericks won 49 games. The Pacers won 56. Now, I know there's 7-game difference, but I think we all agree the West is a little bit harder to win in, so that kind of balances out there. But Paul George, you're right. Defensively, he is better than Dirk, but I just felt that Dirk did more for the Mavs, getting them into the playoff hunt, because they were chasing that playoffs for a long time.
And conference has to come into play here. That's what I went with Anthony Davis at the end. You could go with a Jefferson, well-deserved guy. You could still stick with Hibbert there and try and, again, forget the last 2 months, which is fine. But I just went Anthony Davis. You could even say the same for DeMarcus Cousins. Monster numbers on poor teams, but in a much more difficult conference. If the Pelicans are in the East, they're probably in the exact same spot that the Bobcats were. Again, I'm not trying to knock out Jefferson. I'm just saying Anthony Davis was deserving, in my opinion, despite being very, very young, to already be on my all-third NBA team.
And that's why I went with Al Jefferson myself, because he did get the Bobcats into the playoffs. He had a great season, especially after the All-Star game. He bumped his numbers up to 25 points and 11 rebounds, shooting 53%.
Yeah, that's unreal.
We could have made the playoffs in the Eastern Conference League.
There's a look at some snubs that didn't make any of our 3 NBA teams there. Now, Wade and Westbrook injuries came into play.
Yeah, that made it easier.
Or resting this
the fact that they didn't play a lot of games.
Yeah, Mike Conley for a guard position. DeMarcus Cousins, as I said, monster numbers, like player efficiency rating through the roof there with guys like Anthony Davis. And then Duncan always comes up, and you're like, is he a center? Is he a forward?
Carmelo didn't even make our snubs board, guys.
Yeah.
Carmelo had an MVP level season playing for a horrible, horrible team.